and more importantly, continue the protection of the health, safety, and welfare of all of our residents. I urge you to adopt these changes in their entirety, and I am concerned that you are proposing to delete two paragraphs with respect to the one about whether or not any environmental enforcement actions have been brought against an individual. I would ask that you recall the concerns about the applicant for the CAFO a few years ago and the quality of his operations of his existing hog farm. There were some very serious concerns about whether or not he had acted negligently. And my second comment on your proposed change of deleting the record keeping on the leak detection system, if not the township, then who would be inspecting this detection system, making certain that it's operating properly? So, as I'm saying, I urge you to adopt these changes in their entirety, as they have gone through a rigorous public review and comment process. I further urge you to reject the revisions that were offered at your January 7th meeting. They were made from a financial and self-interested point of view. Here are my objections to the revisions that were offered on January 7th.
Well, let's not hear those until we are considering those.
Okay? Well, but this is part of my comment, and it's going to be brief, and then I will sit down.
All right, go ahead.
Okay. We should keep the changes concerning the township engineer review of all aspects of a proposed KO or CAFO in order to protect the township residents. A licensed civil engineer is qualified to review any proposed agricultural facility to see that it complies with all federal, state, and local regulations, which after all are designed to prevent a catastrophe. Second, the current requirement to place large animal operations on poor quality agricultural lands has been modified by the advertised changes, which state where feasible, locate on poor quality lands. If not feasible, they can be located on higher quality soils. However, in all cases, such buildings and facilities shall be located so as to minimize loss of crop productivity. The advertised changes go on to state important principles to be used by the supervisors in their evaluation of the applicant's proposal for buildings and facilities to be used in large animal operations. Third and last, as to the concern about the township keeping documents related to KOs and CAFOs on file, I feel confident that the township staff can be responsible with sensitive information, and it is essential that this information be available to them. I thank you for listening to my comments.
All right, thank you. Now, Rick,
Can I just have a quick question before my comment? Are you guys going to make other strikes, or this is the only things you're going to strike?
it's the only things we're going to strike. Yes.
No, I don't care about them things, so I'll let it rest.
All right.
I do.
Sam?
I have an objection to striking the ability of the township to go in and monitor the leak detection system.
Yeah.
Yep.
That is basically putting the fox in charge of the hen house. Okay? If you have a complaint, who checks? How do you check? The record keeping and inspections are at the discretion, or not the discretion, wrong word. It's a self-check system that DEP has put in place. That's not sufficient. And that's my objection. What we have here has been mulled over several times, which basically says that we can inspect when they inspect, so there's no impact on them. That if there's no issues found, the taxpayer will take the brunt of the cost of the inspection, so there's no issue there. I don't understand why it's being struck.
All right.
Could we get an answer on that?
Well, they're doing comment.
We're just taking comments, and then we'll give answer. Anybody back there? Yes.
So you're saying that DEP's not going to come out and inspect the
The EP will be able to inspect.
But
Right
you're
now,
gonna-
they inspect once a year.
What, What actually are you saying then? What are you trying to take out?
We're trying to take out so that the township don't have to do the inspection.
Because we're right here.
We don't feel as though there's anybody, I mean, you'd almost have to be licensed to do it.
To peek in a thing to see if it's leaking? That's ridiculous.
Michelle's been coming out, she's not licensed to check out
We need
sewage.
all the protection that we can get. You know, there was a 40-year-old building sitting there for years with hydrogen sulfide in it, you know, that eats through concrete and rebar, you know, and you guys did nothing about it. The town needs as much protection as they can get.
All right. Any other comments? Rick?
Well, I think it's ridiculous to think that you need a licensed person to look in a hole to see if there's water in it.
Me too.
All you're doing is looking down a hole to see if there's water in it. Any
Idiot.
elementary school dropout can look down a hole and see if there's water in it. And
I wouldn't want to go to court and try to prove it.
All you need is a camera with a date.
I just don't get it. It just seems,
It's
to
ridiculous.
me, it's such a basic thing to safeguard the water of the township, to just have somebody take a peek. You know, that's all they're doing. It's just utterly ludicrous not to allow it.
It's gonna be easy
All right.
to use, but it's
Any
not
other
to them.
comments?
It's hard.
Or,
And on one hand, I want to say I'm sorry because I get so angry about the fact that the most basic fundamental need of life for each and every one of us is clean water. You know, we're not asking for the moon or the sky. We're just asking that you, our appointed officials, who we appointed to say protect us. I'm not asking you to protect me from aliens or anything absurd. Protect my water. Because without water, even our livestock, whether it be horses or pigs or cows, without clean water, none of us can live. Our homes are then worthless. Our property is worthless. We can't function without clean water. And water's, you know, it's going to be the next gold standard. When our water is polluted, and where are we going to get it from? Where are we going to get it from? And we're asking you, take these basic things that you put in place originally and that our planning commission worked on diligently for so long, leave them in place. Allow these protections to stay in place so that I have clean water, my daughter, my animals, and everybody, all my neighbors, so we don't have to be concerned whether or not our wells are going to get contaminated. And I think that the people we have here in the township are capable of doing this. And I know that you live on the other side of town, but I have property on that side of town, less than a half a mile away from the facility, and my house is less than a quarter of a mile from some of the fields that are spread. All we're asking is just protect us. Just protect our water supply. It's not rocket science. We just want that protection. You had it in place before, leave it there. It's really, really important to everybody in this township, our children, our grandchildren, and the residents and the taxpayers who elected you to protect us.
all right. Any other questions, comment?
Yeah. Down the line, you said, you know, test wells were insufficient, they're a joke, and now you want to remove this. What safeguards do you have in mind to put in place? Just in case all the information and science out there on these types of operation is true, what do you have in mind? Anything? As a safeguard? Nothing?
Well, the state is the one that checks it.
The state's not efficient.
Once a year? And
Well,
they
that's
don't
what
even
we
do that.
would be checking it once a year.
Some of these facilities haven't been seen in 3 to 5 years.
No,
that's not true.
I think they've all been seen in the last year.
Here, I ran it, check,
So,
got on the
if the
computer.
paperwork's in here, will you believe it then?
we got on the computer and got all of the CAFOs in South Central Pennsylvania district. And it gave out the dates that they were inspected. And they all were inspected once during the past year
By
by the state. Some
Farm
state
personnel?
inspected- I don't know who inspected them. It doesn't say who inspected them.
I have it at home, farm personnel.
All right,
No, not the individual. By a state inspector once a year, and it gives the date of the inspection. Now, of course, I can't possibly know whether the list that I got off the computer was or was not accurate. I mean, you know, whether there were CAFOs that were not listed, but the ones that were identified on the DEP website as CAFOs in South Central Pennsylvania, I checked and got the dates of inspection. They were all inspected in the past year because I was very interested in whether or not they were really inspecting them. And so, in fairness to everybody, I did look it up, and that's what I found.
Any other questions, comments in the back there?
Christina Jeffy, you just said that not all of them were listed on there.
No, I didn't say that at all. I said I cannot possibly know for certain that they were all listed. But I'm saying this is what was identified on the DEP website as CAFOs in South Central Pennsylvania region.
Isn't that something we should check first?
How are you going to find out if they missed something on the website? I mean, you know, unless you drive every
sure
mile throughout South Central
DEP.
Pennsylvania, and I don't think you'd possibly figure it out. And even then you wouldn't know whether it was a CAFO, you wouldn't know how many animals they had. So if you can't accept the DEP website, I don't know how you're going to question it.
We call DEP. I'm sure they have phones.
Yeah, well, DEP has on their website their information. And anything that they give you on the phone's what's on their website.
Any other questions?
I have a comment about this. Firstly, I did call your county, and if you strike things off of this ordinance, unless it's something minor like a number or one word, then it can be voted on. If it is things taken out or added to it, things stripped out or added, I talked to your county today. It has to be sent back to your county, it has to be re-advertised, and it has to have a public meeting again.
Wait a minute. We having a public hearing on each of these. We cannot change the ordinance, the existing ordinance, in a way which has not been advertised. But in my judgment, we do not have to change it in every way that's been advertised. For instance, I'll give you an example, which I just gave to, I think Chris Newman called me today. Suppose, let's say, example, we permitted brothels in the commercial zone. And we advertised an ordinance that we were going to add them and permit them both in the residential, the R2, and the agriculture zones, and the industrial. And we had a public hearing. I believe that we could decide at the public afterwards and a vote. We could cross out everything except industrial. You could decide to allow them in the industrial zone, but not in other zones. Because you wouldn't be changing. The existing ordinance doesn't allow them in any zone other than commercial. So I think you can make less changes than advertised. You cannot make unadvertised changes. But I believe it is legal for these supervisors to eliminate sections of the ordinance that when they eliminate them, it does not change anything in the existing ordinance. The existing ordinance does not require that someone present a list of environmental violations. That's not in the current ordinance.
In the advertised ordinance, was that in there?
It's not in the current ordinance, the one that's in the book.
Right.
Okay. The fact that we advertised we're going to make it so, we don't have to adopt it and make it. That doesn't change the current ordinance. The same way the current ordinance doesn't say anything about leak detection systems. So in my mind, as an attorney, as a lawyer, I believe under the law we can adopt an ordinance that doesn't change the rules on leak detection systems. Now you can't take this advertised thing and add things to it. But you don't have to adopt every change to an ordinance that's advertised.
It's false
Okay.
advertising. Now,
Look,
you may
no, no,
say
no.
it's legal, but
Wait.
is it ethical?
No, it's not.
Wait a minute.
Is it ethical to
Well,
the...
I mean, I can't deal with that. I'm trying to deal with that.
No ethics.
I'll go on with public comment, but I just want it to be known to the supervisors. I did specifically call York County today to ask them the procedures. I also talked to Earl Shookman from Shrewsbury Township.
Earl very well.
Yeah, he said, I'm surprised, Gil. I said, well, I just called up county, but I wanted to call you also. And he said the same thing. The way that it's worded is anything that's substantially amended, which, according to York County, means anything added or taken away from. So if this passes, there's going to be calls to York County that it was not done by law. Okay?
If you were to say, now, for instance, if we decided, the board decided that they wanted to eliminate the requirement of a special exception, they can't do that by crossing out that, because we right now have a special exception in the ordinance.
Right.
We can't take away the special exception when we haven't advertised that we're going to take away the special exception. But we don't have to put in everything we advertise.
Okay, that's
So,
different.
I mean, that's my legal opinion, and I have presented that.
Okay, it's different from what they told me.
Well, that may be, and if somebody wants to disagree with it and wants to challenge it, they can do that. But this is my opinion.
Okay, all right.
And I've given some research and thought to it.
All right.
It wasn't just drummed up 5 minutes ago.
All right, I'm just letting you know.
All
About this with taking away some of these protections. When we started this whole process years ago with all this, I mean, we had concerns, and we had where the township engineer was supposed to go and do the engineer drawings and check them and be called for inspection. And if you remember, they built it and never called him in and couldn't say it was built as drawn. Right? Then they had the use and occupancy. They operated for 10 months without a use and occupancy permit. We're told not to restock the barn with pigs, and they did anyway. And again, nobody did anything up here to protect us. You know, we talked about all this with the water. Here again, still, he's applying on fields he's not supposed to be applying on according to the nutrient management plan. According to the nutrient management plan. And now we have a farm in our township that they have 2 wells contaminated. They can't live there anymore. We need protection. It can't just be for one person in the township, especially when they're constantly breaking the rules. And I just handed in the ones from this. There's violations on it. I gave all kinds of information and records to the Planning Commission. They worked for a whole year in a bipartisan fashion to get this done, provided by documentation that they were giving as to how we were not being protected by the state. Why would we give up something that's not going against what the state says we can do? It just doesn't make sense. This is not, a small operation. These produce more manure than our entire township.
Oh, come on.
Oh my God!
That's true.
If you don't,
It's not.
it is so. It is so.
Sam, do you have anything?
Well,
Can you believe this? This is what you get.
I have a statement and a question.
Don't believe
And the
it's fine.
statement is, if in fact DEP is doing inspections, it's a recent thing. Because we had paperwork which said different when we developed the original ordinance. Unfortunately, we haven't revisited that with this ordinance, okay? Since it went to the Planning Commission in York County. So if it's being done, it may be the result of the attention they're getting from here now, okay? And that's a good thing, but that doesn't mean it's going to continue to happen either. Because they just had budget cuts that reduced their manpower supposedly. What are they going to do? Go back to the farmer doing it? I don't agree with farmer doing it. I don't agree with me doing it on something I own, as if it's a legal requirement. Okay.
So how many of you have voiced your opinion to your state elected representatives?
And I also, if you don't mind, I'm going to add, because he told me to add this, and I did tell Gil this, and I think I told Sam, but Charlie again said, Charlie Spear, that had stood up for the citizens with this ordinance, that any help that you need to fight this, they are willing to come in and assist in any way they can. And they are more than qualified to do it. So they're offering to help.
But one other point, I forgot my statement, guys, please, okay? I want the floor back. And the statement is, this ordinance is not written for one farmer, okay? And that, we tried to pay attention to that as it was developed. And that shouldn't be the major thing, is the ordinance against an individual. That's not why it was written, okay? So that was the statement I wanted to make.
All right. Anybody different want something to say?
Steve Izzo.
My concern, one, is that by eliminating this, you're striking a precedent whereby maybe the township is losing control over making any kind of inspections, and the state is the only one that's allowed to. The other thing is, I don't understand what exactly you're gaining by striking these things. If there's not a gain, then it makes no sense to strike them. So my question is, please tell me, what is being gained by striking these? What is the gain to you guys or to the township? I don't see it. If there is one, I'm asking you to tell me what it is.
All right, well, Joe, as soon as we get through everybody, is everybody finished?
Sir, could I have your name, please?
Steve Izzo, I-Z-Z-O.
All right, we've heard all the comments and questions now.
I have a question. Do you have an estimate of what it costs, what it will cost the township to do inspections?
No, not an estimate, but
We can always have a bake sale.
I don't mind. We're paying for these plans that aren't being followed. We might as well pay for at least inspections.
all right. Now, we have this ordinance.
Well, now what you need to do is to vote to the motion to strike the sections in question. You need to vote on that motion first.
Well, we want to give a reason why. And do you want to give a reason, John?
Well, one thing, if we took your county's recommendations, we'd throw the whole thing out. Your county doesn't like it at all. So despite, all the work that the planning commission has done, let's see, what do they say? It says, since concentrated animal operations and concentrated animal feeding operations are ultimately under the jurisdiction of the state and is required to meet all applicable state, federal, and federal laws, there would be no grounds on which to deny or further regulate such a use. So they're recommending to not even do anything.
Are you sure that? I thought that was the special exception.
That refers to the special exception.
That refers to the special exception.
But
not the entire thing.
they're not. The county is not happy with it. Secondly, we're not doing away with inspections of leak detection system. It's just that we're letting the state do it, not ourselves. Also, we're due to go to court, and if we don't have something, it could be that everything gets thrown out, and you may not have anything. If you go before a judge, and the judge says, and if we don't do something with this, then we go back to the original. And if we take the original back to the judge, and the judge takes one look at it, he'll throw it all out, and guess what? We don't have any say at all. And that's where we're heading. And that's where we're heading in, what is it, March, Gilbert?
Well, we have to, in March, have our dispositive motions filed.
Right.
And
Now,
there are two sections of the current ordinance which I believe we cannot successfully defend. Two sections of the current ordinance which are limited by this ordinance. They include the definition of concentrated animal operation, and they include, the other one is a requirement, it regards the having the places where you're going, the contracts to dispose of manure in writing, because the regs don't state that, and that was one of the objections they raised. They say you have to, I mean, you know, it would make sense that they should be in writing, but the regs don't state that, and so us requiring them in writing makes it more strict than the state regulations in that area. You know, why the state regulations are the way they are, I can't know.
Well, why not just change those two things and let
Right.
it stand as it is?
Well, this ordinance, you know, if you look at the ordinance as a whole, the Planning Commission worked a great deal on this ordinance to kind of split up what we had to do before the building permit, which you had to do before the use certificate, which you had to do after the use certificate. It gave a good deal of, I think the ordinance is much superiorly drafted than the original. I mean, we have two sections that were in it that the supervisors believe should be removed, and that's their prerogative.
Okay, John, I understand the need to act, but could you address the second proposed deletion, the one that pertained to whether the person has any environmental mishaps in the past 10 years?
Well, realistically, when you look at that section, I have to kind of agree. I'm not sure why we have it in, because suppose somebody has a whole bunch of environmental violations. We cannot, there's a law that we can't deny them a permit. Now, if they have unpaid fines, then you can, but there's a state law that came out about a year and a half ago that set forth when you could deny permits to people because of prior violations. And that's covered, you know, in that, and we still have the benefit of that law. That's a state law. That you can deny permits who have unpaid fines. But if they have absolutely, you know, if they've been, have environmental violations and they paid their fines or cured them, supplying them to the township doesn't do really anything, because now we got the information. What can we do with it? It's not a basis to deny the permit.
Closer eye on things.
I mean, that's the realistic.
And you got to realize, this is a CAFO.
Yeah.
If you want to see someone that's got an arm's list of violations, go to Gladfelder Paper. And yet Gladfelder Paper can get permits. If they were, whatever township they're in over at Spring Grove, if they had an ordinance that had this statement in there, Gladfelder Paper would never be able to do anything because of their prior violations. But they address the violations, they pay their fines, and they remedy the violations. So, I mean, to put something in there where you start going into someone's background saying, oh, you did this years ago, you can't have a permit. I mean,
well, this doesn't say you can't have a permit, but it says they have to reveal it.
I know, but still, it gets into the, you know, a friend of mine got into trouble with the state and got into trouble with DEP because he pulled a dead tree out of Muddy Creek and the water got muddy, and he got fined. And he was a farmer who just was pulling a tree that fell in the Muddy Creek out because it was blocking up. So, I mean, these are some of the violations that would have to be noted by people.
Well, our president congressman has environmental violations.
In the first place.
What?
I totally agree with you. If you can't do anything with the information, don't collect it in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, it becomes so intrusive. You know, it's, you know, you could end up with one for the, you might drive your tractor through the stream on your farm and somebody sees you and reports you, and the inspector comes out and sees the tractor tracks and writes you up. You understand? And then if you want a permit for something, well, we want to see all the list of violations, and we find that you know, you have a violation for muddying the stream. It doesn't belong in there. Is just the way I felt about it.
All right.
Got another question?
Question in the back.
So you're saying like if a farmer drives across someone's property that they're not supposed to be on and ruts up their property, and then manure runs off onto their property, and they get a violation, that could further them from getting a permit. Is that what you're saying now?
No.
Just
you'd
have to list it
as a violation to the township, and we can't do nothing about it.
It's
So
a
you-
civil matter. What you're talking about is a civil matter.
Yeah, but if
Between you and the
if
farmer.
they keep having issues, doesn't that like kind of lend to what kind of farming they're going to be doing? And if they're going to get larger facilities, they're just going to be having larger issues?
The state has established the criteria for a CAFO. We cannot trump state law. We can't overregulate state law. The state has established and has updated. They do it continually. The idea of this ordinance was to at least to try to address some of the blatant overreach of the township in the previous ordinance. Now, if we do not adopt this, then we go back to the original, and we will be crucified, as rightly so. And then we have nothing. That's the plain and simple part of it. We either have something or we have nothing. Because we are at a deadline. That's what Gilbert just said.
But if I may, I think the argument is not necessarily whether or not the ordinance should be adopted. It's striking the two issues. And the case, my opinion, has been made that the issue of prior violations, since there's nothing we can do about it and state law preempts that, us doing anything with it, should probably come out, okay, because it's useless. And that again, go back to the other one, the inspections, I don't think that's useless. And you can adopt the ordinance with that in or with it out. If you adopt it with it in, you have a stronger ordinance.
I just want to say something, not on anything on the ordinance, but just on the procedure that you're doing. By striking parts of that ordinance, you are changing what people thought was going to be adopted, or heads up, heads down, that you advertise. That's why you advertise, because you're telling the public, this is what we're going to do. By striking parts of it, you have changed the meaning of that ordinance, especially when you strike out certain protections like the test. And therefore, I believe that you have a legal obligation to re-advertise the ordinance. And that's just common sense. I mean, if you remove something from something that's irrelevant, that doesn't affect the meaning of the ordinance, then of course you don't have to re-advertise them. But when you take a whole section out that provides protection for the community, and you say you don't have to advertise it, nobody's aware that you were going to do it. It doesn't seem right to me. I know we're up against a deadline, but there's still no reason why we shouldn't do it ethically, if not legally.
All right.
Thank you.
Now, we've heard all we're going to hear from the audience. We're gonna, do you have any comment you want to make, Janet?
No.
Well, my comment is that the one about
The leak detection.
about the leak detection system is totally, I don't want to say worthless, but I mean the state is going to check it once a year. And if the farmer has any inklings of it leaking, he is going to know it, and he is going to have to report it to the state and have to get it fixed. And I guarantee you, if he has to get it fixed, you would know it. But basically all you would do is pump the manure out and seal the crack.
Dave, you had a whole township pump sewage into a stream, a township with township supervisors telling the township, and they pumped sewage into a stream. It was all over the news.
Yep.
And you expect when a township doesn't follow the law, you expect every farmer to follow the law? It's ludicrous.
It's his ground and his water.
All of our
It's all of our water, and it's all of our ground.
He's the one that has to make more of a living off the water than you do.
The DEP is also going to call ahead and tell him when he's going to be inspected, so he knows to get his little well cleaned up before the DEP shows up.
No, that don't.
Yes, it does work that way.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
We're going to vote on this.
First, you're gonna vote on the motion to delete. You gotta do that
Yeah.
first.
We had a motion, I tabled it, and it was a motion.
Stop just a minute. I don't think there's anybody at this point opposed to the record keeping. I know I heard that several times tonight, right? We were not opposed to changing anything with the record keeping here at the township.
Right.
Well, you could leave the first sentence.
But this is more stringent than what the state is.
The state keeps records, so you can.
We could keep the same records. We can't keep any additional inspections.
Right.
We can't,
So
like,
you're saying
put them
you
in
wanna
double
keep the first-
jeopardy to
Want
put
to keep the
them.
first sentence, is that what you're saying?
Well, I don't know if that makes any difference, but I'm good with taking the whole thing out because I know that we talked about, we are in favor, or a majority is in favor of keeping the records here. And that was part of what that sentence really was about. It's about the record keeping of it, not about forcing the leak detection and all that. That's regulated by the state. So that's
Well,
why I'm okay with that
wanna
one
do that?
going. I'm okay with the whole thing going, but I know in my mind that the paperwork stuff that people ask about is still in there.
I mean, I thought you were going to keep the first sentence. Dude.
Just, in other words, description of the
What the first sentence that we're
inspection
talking about
requirements.
is if the proposed manure storage facility is to incorporate a leak detection system, the applicant must provide the township with an identification and description of the record keeping and inspection requirements with respect to the system. That's the piece I'm talking about, that we're not thinking of changing anything out. Below that, the leak detection system itself is not regulated by us, it's regulated by the state. And that's the part that comes
I
out.
can live with that, keeping it in. That way you'd have a record if there was a leak. I like the idea of the record keeping.
And we'll then amend your motion to delete all but the first sentence.
Yeah. I'll also move.
All right, we got,
Okay, so the
There
motion
it
is
is.
to strike paragraph 2A1
yeah,
and to keep the first paragraph of
First sentence.
first sentence of 2B9 and strike the rest of that.
Right.
And that's it. And I'm sure the Attorney General will tell us what else we can't have in there.
Exactly.
Well, they're going to do a new thing because there's, I mean, most everything, well, the only things left really from what they filed would be the foreground issue.
Yeah.
All the rest of them are gone.
all right. Now,
That was, I made the motion.
you
I'll
made the
second it.
motion to leave the first sentence of this number 9 in about the record keeping for the leak detection system.
Right.
And you seconded it.
Yep.
All those in favor of that motion, give their consent by saying aye.
Aye.
And now, we have a tabled motion. We were deleting,
We amended it, so we're now deleting all but the first sentence of B9, and we're deleting 2A1.
yeah, well, we didn't vote on this.
Yeah, we need to vote on that.
What is that you're talking about? Is this something new?
No.
Same thing we just talked
Same thing we just talked about?
Criminal
All
background is what it is.
right, okay.
So I'll make a motion. Well, we already made that motion.
Yeah,
We made the
now we have to
motion,
vote on
and
it.
we seconded and tabled it. Now, I'm bringing it up. And now, everybody that's in favor of deleting the criminal background check portion of this proposal, give their consent by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Now, that's the two things we...
And no, wait a minute, you didn't announce when you asked for that vote that everybody who's in favor of deleting all but the first sentence of B9.
We did that first.
Yeah,
Oh,
we
you
did that.
Okay,
yeah.
you voted on that?
Yep.
That was our first one.
Okay, then let's vote on, now we need to get it signed. Now you need to vote on the whole ordinance. As amended.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Motion made and second, we adopt this ordinance with two deletions.
Don't mark up all
All-
these things.
Hmm?
You want to take a question?
You can mark up yours, but no, I mean, you can.
All those in favor of the motion, give their consent by saying aye.
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 Why not?
You can do one yours for the ones I put in the book and send.
Oh, I'm not waiting on yours.
Okay, you keep that one.
I put an X.
Yeah, that's fine. But you put it through the whole thing, but I'll retype that page, just don't read that.
I heard 2 ayes. Were there 3 ayes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right,
I got a question in the back.
now you need to sign.
You got a question in the back.
Actually, I just wanted an acknowledgement for Mr. Cheyenne's recording because I had my arm up for a long time before you did your vote. And I have a question about what Mr. Johnson said after the questions were coming up and I didn't get to ask.
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand. You could ask it. Do you want to ask your question?
Isn't it a little too late after you already answered?
Well, I figure it is, but if you want to ask, you can, or tell me, you can do it.
I had a question about the fact that Mr. McConnell asked, and it was volunteered that Mr. Johnson would answer of why they were going to remove the one paragraph, and he never gave an answer. He said, your county doesn't like the whole thing, so you're removing something. That's...
Well, he gives the answer.
I gave the answer.
That was his answer.
No, I gave the answer to the 2 questions. The question about the 2 removals.
And what was the first one?
About the criminal background check.
No, about the inspection removal.
The reason why I don't, because the state already requires it, it becomes more strict than the state has. We are going to court soon. We have to go to court with and present to what I feel is our strongest case. And
If it's in conjunction
this
with, it's not
is
strictly.
not our strongest case with the way that was written, because it becomes more restrictive than what the state requires.
It's parallel to what the state's requiring.
That's what happened.
Because the state wrote the laws. And we can't say, okay, the expressway has a 65-mile-an-hour speed limit. Well, we're going to drop it to 35 miles an hour because we don't like 65. Do you understand? We can't usurp state law.
But I thought the law was written that we can do the same thing the state
And that's
does,
what we're
but
doing.
not excessive.
That's right. And we are
So if
doing
the
it.
state
We are
does
saying the
inspections-
state is inspecting. We just want a copy of the state's inspection.
But if the state
But
inspects,
if we go
why can't
beyond
we?
that and say, no, we want to inspect it too because we don't trust you. Now,
If
don't
the
you think that's a
inspection's
little
at the
more...
same time, it's not...
No, it's
Right.
the same.
It's the same.
Right.
It's the
Well,
same
The
as
fact
the
is,
state.
you would
Then
be
it's an opinion.
guaranteeing that if the state does slack off again, like they have done in the past and not inspected every year, it would still get done. You would be guaranteeing those protections.
We can do the
I mean, it's a
same, but
moot
not
point
excessive.
now. In fact, we find the state with DEP abandons and doesn't able to inspect, we can always, you know, take it, you know, pass an amendment.
Yeah, as long as it's taken to do this, really, you're just gonna pass another amendment?
That's true.
I got a question totally on a different subject.
Good.
Can we pass a law to find people that stop in that circle and let me ticket them as a bounty, split it with the township?
Especially those ones that have those bars across the roof, right? And the marks on the side of the car say Pennsylvania State Police. Those are the ones I see parked in the circle.
No, not parking, the ones that stop in the circle.
They don't know how to get through the
They don't know how
circle.
to merge and separate.
Some people can't figure them out.
But, I mean, my question is, could we, if we wanted to?
No,
No?
that's a state road. We don't regulate state roads.
Well,
One more question. Would you guys want help from Charlie Spear to fight this?
that was quick.
I guess they're really not concerned with protecting us then. Free help from the best lawyer in the world.
Doing what's right.
Jesus.
That's all they.
Why don't you wait till after the lawsuit and see what happens?
Say what?
There's a lot of confusion.